Welcome back to Timo's Dinky Detailing. Today I'm going to be doing a French toy. It's a Dinky Toy 24D Plymouth Belvedere. It is a 1955 Belvedere, and here it is. And it's it's intact, but it's in rough shape. You can see that the above the headlights, the eyebrows of the headlights are dented in, and also the tail fins are bent inward. So it's been very roughly handled, and I'm going to have to find some way. You can see where it's dented there. Some way to make it back into the shape that it's supposed to be, or at least get it reasonably close so that it will look like the original model. So I think I'm going to be able to grind out some of that metal inside the headlight wells, and that will hopefully get it to look a little bit better. Otherwise, the thing looks in pretty good shape. It was taken apart. Somebody drilled out the posts, so there's holes in there, and they repainted the thing solid green. It comes with a base that's pretty bent up. It's not very rusty, but it's very, very bent up. I can't read what it says on that sticker. If anybody can figure out what the heck it says, that would be interesting, or maybe not. So there you can see Plymouth Belvedere. Now the tires, this has got a full set of tires. The fronts and the backs don't match, but they're close enough. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm happy that they're all soft. That's my thumbs up. So the axle I'm cutting off, and I've got these hubs. These hubs are a little bit different from the British hubs. These were plated, and this one is painted. And it's painted so that the axle is stuck, obviously, and it's a bit of a challenge to get the axle out of there. So that's finally through. So I'll have to strip the paint off of that one, and then I've got another one, and I honestly can't remember where I got that extra hub, but it matches the other hubs, and I don't remember if it was with this toy or if I had it from another model. Anyway, it's there, and I'm happy to have it. So now I've heated up using this little torch that's used for lighting funny cigarettes, but they sell them in all the stores nowadays in Canada because that stuff is legal here. But anyway, it's a handy little lighter, which is like a little torch, so I use that to warm the casting up. Hammering it didn't seem to make any impression on it, so I'm going in with my parallel pliers. This is a pretty dangerous operation because I've got no control over bending it, or if the metal starts to give. And during this period, it is kind of working. I'm getting it closer and closer. And I'm not sure if the heating helps, but I'm pretty sure it does, because when I tried it without heating, I wasn't able to make any impression on it at all. So it looks pretty straight there. But while off camera, I gave it a go again, and I broke off one of the fins. So that's going to be something I have to repair. So now this base, which is really bent up quite a bit. It's almost to the point where you would say it's wrinkly. So I'm not going to show you the whole process because I basically was doing this a lot and did a whole bunch of hammering on it, and I eventually got it to a stage where it looks pretty reasonable. It doesn't look like a new base. It still looks like it's a bit wrinkly, but it's just a very awkward thing because there is a bend on each side, like the little wings on that base. So it's hard to figure out even what that angle is supposed to be. And I got it to the point where it fits in, and it's going to fit in with the screw holes. And then I got to get a twist out of it, because if it's twisted, then it won't sit properly when it's finished. So I'm going to go into the paint stripper, and it's in the evening, so it's dark outside, so I don't have very good video because there's not much light out there. But you know the routine, it's boiling water and caustic soda, and when I come back the paint is off of it. So the paint came off pretty good on this one. It was a repaint, so whatever paint they used wasn't some super duper paint, because sometimes that's what you run into. So I go on the wire wheel and polish this whole thing up. I obviously will shorten this because it's not interesting to watch me buffing the whole thing. So I've got that broken part. So what I do is I put a piece of tape right on where the fin is supposed to be, and then I put JB weld. So I mix up, this is epoxy, and it contains metal parts, so it's very strong. So this is the next morning. You can say I folded over the tape so that it would hold in the shape of this pointy triangle. It sticks out a little bit too far, so using the clippers, not the best, so I go in with a file and I bring that thing down to the point where it's matching the other side. And on the outside it looks good because the tape is conforming to the body shape, so it pretty much matches. But the inside is kind of hollow, so I'm going in with the spot and glaze putty. The JB weld is very hard to work with once it's hardened, and so the spot and glaze putty turns into a very soft, powdery type of finish that makes it easier to sand and to file. So there, I've done a lot of repair on parts of the casting that were poor. They were either corroded or they were slightly flawed from the factory, but I filled in all the gaps so to make sure that when the paint goes on, you don't see too many blemishes. So here I'm going and taking out some of the dented the eyebrows on those headlights. I'm not sure if you would notice, looking at the pictures online, that those eyebrows would be much shorter than the original ones. I think it looks pretty much the same. If you put two side by side, maybe you could tell, but I'm not going to try and pull those eyebrows out anymore. I'm just going to take off what has been dented in and is covering over top of the headlights, so that it makes it look wrong. So I did that. So you can see I've got the drill press vise clamped with one screw to my workbench. So that let me hold it very rigidly while I was doing that Dremel tool. So there, it's got a coat of gray primer. So now I've got to get those wheels, those hubs, back to new looking, and basically they need to be buffed on the wheel. These are they look like they're machined steel, and they've been plated with some kind of nickel plating or something, but the nickel plating is partly worn off and they got rusty a little bit, so they're coming up pretty good with just a buffing on the buffing wheel. Now for these tires, they're all in good shape, but they are dirty, so I put them in some lightly soapy water, and then I hit them with the Fantastic. So Fantastic, I like that cleaner because it kind of eats away at different kinds of dirt, and in this case it had even trouble because there's some kind of a dark material that's kind of gooey. So that's why I got the paper towel out and try and pick up some of it off of there, because it's not dissolving completely with the cleaning fluid. Anyway, I went through all of these this way. So in the end, they all came out clean. and the one pair is very white and the other pair is a bit yellow, and I'm not sure that the yellow is even because it's old or dirty. I think some of the tires were done in white and some in yellow. So these probably are not tires that were with the toy altogether. But I'm going to use them anyway because I don't have any more new white tires to replace them with. So I'm happy to use them. They're going to look close enough, and I think everyone will be happy. So these are my axles. I make them from 2mm stainless steel tubing, and because there's a hole through, I can put a nail in the end and glue the nail in. That has a domed head. They're like some kind of upholstery nails, and I link below to these parts, at least to the Canadian links, and you might be able to find the similar parts once you know what they're called, wherever you're ordering them from, whether it's the UK, the US, or somewhere else. So these are the little nails, and they're perfect. They're exactly the right size. They're dome shaped. The only thing is they have a finish that makes it look like they're covered in some kind of bronze. So that finish comes off very, very quickly on the buffing wheel, just like 2 seconds, and poof, it's shiny silver. So here I'm using 5-minute epoxy. I put a little dab there, and then I put my mushroom on. Now this is the floating axle that can be assembled before the model, so that's the front axle. And at least that's done. Now I'm getting ahead of myself. I still haven't painted, but I'm looking at the interior and headlights, and I found some plastic. This is the plastic bubble covering a bottle brush from the dollar store, and I saved it because it's curved, and I'm thinking, well, there's going to be curved windshields, and the back window of this thing is wraparound, and I figure, okay, my only chance is to use this because it's already curved shaped. To try and force something to be in that curve is a challenge. You can do it. I can do it with those. With the seats, I can put slots there, but for this back one, it's quite radical. But this plastic is just a godsend. It's perfect, and I'm going to be keeping I'm going to go be buying another bottle brush soon to make sure I have a stock of this stuff. So I cover the plastic now with masking tape as I prepare, and I cut it. See, I put it in there and then draw around so I can see where I cut. Obviously I have to make it a little bit wider, and then I do it a little bit at a time until I get it to just the right size. So that's going to fit just perfectly. Now the side windows, there's a little slot on the back seat, and I cut this oddball shape so that it's going to fit. It's just the back window, and this is a hardtop car, so there's no pillar in the middle. So putting that back window is going to be a challenge. So I think I'm just going to glue it in this case to the casting. Now I've gone and painted this and fixed that thing, and now I realize I haven't drilled any threads in here. So there's these holes drilled in, so I'm putting JB weld, and while it was drying I put a toothpick into it so that it would center when I go to the drill press, and part of the thread will be in JB weld, at least that's the intention, and then as it gets deeper, because those holes were maybe a little bit too deep, so that's why I put the JB weld, so that if necessary I could have a thread in the JB weld. The only thing is I ran into a bit of a problem I didn't realize. Here I'm trying to start the top, it won't start. And I'm saying, what the heck is going on? It just turns and it won't bite. I can press on it, I can do anything, whatever. It's not going in. Never had this before. What the heck is going on? Oh, there's a little ring of green plastic. So it grabbed onto that and it spun it inside the hole. So there's, I don't know what was in that hole that was originally holding this car together. So once that came out, no problem. I can tap my hole. I hope there's enough. I hope it comes up high enough in the post that my little screw is going to actually have some purchase before it gets too deep, and I'd have to find a longer screw. So on the back end, I was worried I'm going to have to find another little green ring somehow embedded inside that casting, but no, this time it was okay. So let's see how it goes. So that's good. My little 440 button socket head cap screws go in there and they're going to work. So I'm very pleased with that. So now I've got to put degreaser. The problem is that I had to put the cutting oil, and so I have to wash that cutting oil off. It actually took off some of the primer paint on the inside of the toy. So here I'm painting the interior seats, and here I'm painting the base. These things are out of order. Many times they're out of order just because that's how I did the model. If I'm waiting for some paint to dry or some glue to harden or something, then I might do some jobs in between. Now this is, I believe, the second coat of green paint, and it's too dark. It's completely the wrong color, and so I'm mixing up for the third time my green with my blue green, because it's kind of a bluish green color, and I'm trying to match the picture on the internet. So there's the picture on the internet. The camera doesn't capture it, but I'm getting a pretty good idea of what the color is. So I actually I did 3 coats of color on this one, adding a little white again to make it lighter. I added white and the blue-green, and now I'm going back to paint it. Now in between I had that dark green, and I didn't want to be fighting with it, try and get my new color over top of it, so I put a coat of white primer on there, so I'm going like it's a fresh coat. So now I've got it. It's the correct green. You can see the roof is a little bit light. That's because the roof is going to be a different color. So I didn't worry about wasting paint on that. So this is it's a two-tone vehicle. So the roof is going to be black, and then the bodywork on the bottom is also going to be black. So here I've used I have some cheap paints, and I didn't have any black. I've got to order some black paint. I don't have any good quality black paints. So this one is a cheap paint. I thought, well, you know what? It's not a very complicated part, but the problem is the paint once it's dry, it's kind of rubbery. It's not like the quality paints. This is a no-name brand, and in an emergency I used it, but it did give me some trouble. I'm not going to show you the trouble because in the end it doesn't really matter. I just had to fix it up and spray a little paint over top of it, and that worked out fine. So here I'm getting the base ready with the other axle, and again the same thing, cut the axle to the correct length and put that little nail with the polished head, and all put together with the 5-minute epoxy. So the base is ready. So now I've done the two-tone, the black and the green paint, and back to the tape again, because this one came from the factory with all that trim on the side was painted silver, and so I have no choice but to go in and tape up all of that stuff, and it's very complicated, tiny little things. I'm showing it to you in super high speed. And there, finally, I got everything taped up the way I want it, and making sure that I've pressed down all of those edges. So this is the spray paint I use. and you've seen me using it before. Didn't show it this time. But it's a beautiful silver paint. It looks very much like the original models looked. And what's great is that it goes on and it dries quickly, and you don't smudge it with your fingers. It doesn't come off with any tape. It's like bulletproof. Yeah, the only problem is you can't paint over top of it. It doesn't like it kind of resists other paints. So you kind of have to um, do it as the last step. So there, I got it. I think the color scheme is just beautiful. It's an original color scheme, and I selected it. I believe when I was stripping the paint, I could see that it was actually white with the blue instead of the green and with the black. And I could see that that's what it was underneath that green paint that it started with. But this is a color I'm very attached to, this color scheme of this green and this black, because I must have some memory of some child who had this toy, because it looks very familiar to me. See, I was the poor kid. I only had a couple of these toys, and other kids would get the James Bond toy and with all the fancy features, but I never got one like that because they were too expensive for my parents. But I'm okay with that. If I want one now, I can get one. So here's I'm painting the steering wheel. I only printed this thing once, and the steering wheel didn't work out because I forgot to put a support under it. So it's half a steering wheel, which you might notice as I'm painting it. But I think most people won't notice when they look at it that it's only half a steering wheel. And I didn't want to print out another one. Now this one has very fancy tail lights, and if I just took a brush and painted the tail lights on there, it would look like crap. And I absolutely didn't want to do that. So what I've done is I've made a decal that's actually two layers. You saw earlier I was talking about something else, but I printed a white decal with these tail lights. And this one's stuck. I tried to cut off the plastic with a knife so that I have something to grab onto while I'm releasing it. In this case, I didn't cut it enough, so there was a little string of the printing plastic still stuck on it, and the same thing happened on this one. So I had a little bit of trouble getting those things off. But once I got them on there, I was able to move them into position, and I'm very, very pleased with the result. It looks fantastic. This is the sort of thing that makes a difference between a beautiful restoration and one that's just sort of missing. So you can see I'm having trouble getting it because it's tough to align, and I had to mold and shape that part by hand. I think those taillights came out just stunning. So here I've got the back window. I've got, now once I've shaped it and got it to the right size, now I'm ready to glue it in. I got to get the protective tape off of it. I'm finding that this blue masking tape, it's painter's tape. So it's supposed to be not quite as sticky as the ordinary masking tape. It's more sticky for sure than the Tamiya masking tape that I'm using here. But I find it useful for many jobs. So here I'm just taping it in place, and then I come in with 5-minute epoxy, and I can glue in a few points so that it's going to stay there. And that's enough to get the thing to stay. And while I'm waiting for the glue to harden up, I took out those screws because I know I'm going to have to take them out later when I go to assemble the whole model. Now for the front window, I've done a curved slot, and I'm using a curved piece of plastic as well, but it's got a bend in from that slot to the front windshield, and if I leave it just a straight piece, it won't bend properly. So that's why I cut all those little teeth in there, so that I won't get bending interference from the rigid curve below where the visible part is. So after putting these in, I realized that sometimes I have trouble. They want to pop out or move and shift when I'm installing it. So why don't I just glue them in place? So I mixed up some 5-minute epoxy and glued them in place. So now I'm ready. There's that beautiful back window. Came out perfect. So now I got to put the seats in there, and I don't have to worry about the plastic, but I've got to make sure that that front windshield is restrained inside the frame. It'll pop out if I put it in the wrong position. Here's what happens. I got to push it forward towards the front post, and if I let go, it's going to pop back out. So I've got to find a way of doing it. And so what I do is I tilt. Let's see what I do. I tilt this thing there so that I can hold the front down while I'm putting the base on, so that it doesn't pop out and the windshield doesn't pop out. So there you go, the windshield's in place. They're tricky little things, and in the past I've run into trouble with them, but you learn from your mistakes. You hope you learn. You better be learning. But I've learned from my mistakes, and I've solved them all, so that this one wound up being very, very simple. Everything pretty much went perfectly as I could expect. So let's remind you of what it started out as. And now I think this is perhaps my favorite restoration now. It came out so gorgeous, it's unbelievable. I think it's just a fantastic toy, and the interior makes it even better. And those tail lights, you would think that the factory would have done them. Maybe the factory did do them that way. I've never seen a picture that shows the back in new condition. So I'm really pleased about this toy. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Timo's Dinky Detailing. If you did, you can always like, share, and subscribe and all those things, or you could even buy me a coffee if you can get that thing to work. So until next time, be seeing you.